Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Hrihi Om. Very good. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely wonderful to be here with you again on this Monday. What for us here in Omaha is, as usual, Monday at 7 p.m. Welcome to everyone. This is our weekly live stream satsanga where we get together every Monday at, again, 7 p.m. Central Time. And what we do for those who are new, because we always inevitably have new people who may be wondering what precisely is the nature of this live stream. Well, what this is something that is many tens of thousands, and I'm being very conservative, tens of thousands of years old, but it is being done via technology, and what this is a satsanga. What this is a spiritual event in which we study the Vedic scriptures in a very in-depth, very philosophical, very authentic, very orthodox sort of way. And I usually give a talk for roughly half an hour, 35 minutes, then followed by questions and answers. And as always, I ask people to please refrain from asking any questions now, because I won't see them if you do. I will signal to you when the time comes for questions and answers. That will come a little bit later, again, maybe roughly half an hour. But again, it is absolutely wonderful being here with all of you again. And today is a very special day because we're going to be ending our study of the Isha Upanishad. This is the 8th class, and we began this quite a few weeks ago. And as people know, we've gone through the entire Isha Upanishad. We have only 2 more verses left to do, and these 2 last verses are quite profound actually, but I'll talk about that in just a few moments. But again, this is a very momentous live stream in that we are ending our class on the Isha Upanishad. So for all of you who have been with me for all of these classes, I thank you for being here with me. For those who couldn't be, it's all recorded. So if you go to our channel, you'll see the recordings of all the previous classes, and this eventually will be up there as well. Before we begin, just a few very quick announcements, and that is these. First of all, if you feel so inclined, please feel free to share the link right now to this live stream on any social media that you're on. You know, it's not too late for people to join, even if they join 5-10 minutes from now, even for that matter, 20 minutes, half an hour from now, they will still derive benefit. So please feel free to grab the link to this live stream, share it on any social media that you have whatsoever. That will be very helpful. The other thing is to please like this video, because again, that helps with the algorithms, and in that way, more people have the opportunity to see the video and thus derive benefit from the knowledge that's being presented. The other thing is, please subscribe if you have not yet done so. Please subscribe to this channel, and it definitely will be worth your time in subscribing, because the knowledge presented here is unlike anything else that's presented anywhere on the internet today, indeed in most cases even off the internet. Finally, I want to make just a little bit of an announcement, and that is, most of my students know this already, but I have a new book that I finished writing that is going to be released very, very soon, actually, within a few weeks or so, let's say. This book is called Introduction to Sanatana Dharma, and it is a book that is designed to be precisely what the title says, an introduction to Sanatana Dharma. The book itself is roughly 154 pages, so not very large. As you know, I have a few books that are around 450 pages that I've written. So this is not very big. It's not a very big book. It is written in a very introductory style, very easy to understand, etc. The book cover, thanks to the individual who created the book cover for us, the book cover is truly astoundingly beautiful. And I'm very grateful to the individual. I don't know if he wants his name stated, so I'll just say the person who created the cover, we are very much thankful to him for creating what will be truly a beautiful book cover, both front and back. So again, look out for this book. It's not out yet. It will be in several weeks. When it is out, of course, we will announce it everywhere. If you're connected to the ISDS in any way, Facebook, Gab, Twitter, anywhere whatsoever, if you're on our email list, certainly you'll receive an announcement once this book is out. So with that, we will now dive into the last two verses of the Isha Upanishad. And these two verses, of course, as you've seen is often the case, this is a unit. These two verses go together. It's really one thought shared within two verses. And these two verses are a perfect way, actually, to end the Isha Upanishad. We know that throughout this Upanishad, we've looked at many, many different issues, very deep philosophical issues, including panentheism, the idea of personalism versus impersonalism, the idea of material knowledge and pursuit versus spiritual knowledge and pursuit, and many, many other issues that were there in the verses of the Isha Upanishad. Well, now to end, we are going to be looking at these two last verses that talk about liberation. What a perfect way to end this Upanishad, because this, of course, is the ultimate goal, is moksha, or liberation, for the individual Atman who currently finds himself in Maya, in illusion. So with that, let's go to these verses. We will begin with verse 17. And as always, these are my translations. All of these translations have been mine that I did several years ago. And this is verse 17. May my life air be merged with the totality of air. May my body go to ashes. Om. Now, O my mind, please remember all my strivings toward God. Please remember all that I have done for God. And that's verse 17. A truly beautiful verse, actually, where it's quite obvious what is happening here is that this individual is achieving liberation. And what these two verses describe are several things. The process of liberation, but just to a very small degree, in a very small nutshell. Truthfully, as far as the process of the actual moment of liberation, leaving the body, etc., going to be with God, there's much more that's involved, but this gives a little synopsis. But more than anything, and this is the important thing, these two verses give the mindset, the attitude, what is going on within the person as they are achieving that final liberation, that final samadhi, in which it's not merely that they are being liberated, but they also are simultaneously leaving this world to go to be in Vaikuntha, in the realm of God. So how profound. How profound to enter into the mind of the yogi at that exact moment. So this is what's happening here. So with all that said, let's look at this verse a little bit more in depth. First of all, it starts off in a very interesting way, very yogic way. Again, we have to keep in mind that what it means to be a serious follower of Sanatana Dharma. Again, not just someone who you go to the hospital and you have to fill out paperwork and it has, religion, and you just kind of write in, Sanatana Dharma. No, deeper than that, deeper than simply what you call yourself. What it means to be a practitioner of Sanatana Dharma is that you are a yogi, and a yogi in the true sense of this word. That is, an individual who in every way has practiced the sadhana, the disciplines, the systematic practice through which we reform ourselves internally, but really in every way, ethically, morally, even physically, literally in every way, and with the idea of achieving liberation. Well, this is who is speaking here, is a yogi. So now with all that in mind, now let's look at this first sentence. May my life air be merged with the totality of air. So again, this is a person who he's not just achieving liberation, he is achieving final liberation. He's leaving his body. So what is meant by life air, of course, is prana. Prana. We've heard this term before, perhaps. Prana is that substance within the material world, and it's not just in air, actually. Again, this is just a synopsis. Prana can be found in food, it can be found in sunshine, it's found in many different places, but it is especially found in the air that we breathe. Thus, this is why the yogi does what is called pranayama. That is, they'll do various breathing exercises in such a way that they make the most use of this vital energy that is there within the air itself. So what this yogi is saying is, now that I am leaving my body, I no longer need this prana. So may the prana itself, may this life air leave me and merge into the totality of the life air of the universe. So a truly profound statement. Again, this person is leaving his body to be with God. So this is the first thing to be understood with this first sentence. Now let's go on to the second sentence. May my body go to ashes. Now that's a little bit more straightforward. Again, this individual leaving his body behind and now going off to liberation, what is he saying about the nature of body? Well, this is the nature of the physical. This is the nature of the corporeal. This is the nature of this thing that so many of us, unfortunately, often despite ourselves. Even though we may be spiritual, we still kind of act as if it's us. Even though we know that, as this yogi is saying here, no, this will eventually become ashes. And eventually all of the various elements of the body, the air, the water, the ether, etc., all these various elements will eventually break down and go to their respective elements within the cosmos itself. So in other words, the body is something that's temporary. You know, how old are you? Are you 30? Are you 30 years old, let's say, just as an example? Where was your body 32 years ago? It's non-existent. Are you 40? 40 years old? Where was your body 42, 43 years ago? Non-existent. The body comes into being at a certain time. We are presently, I hope, most of you who are watching me are presently inhabiting a body. Some of you aren't presently inhabiting a body. But most people are inhabiting a body right now as you are listening to me. And you're in the body. You're not of the body. And eventually what happens? We leave the body. Well, what is interesting is this individual, being a yogi, he doesn't leave the body in the same way that others do. You see, eventually everyone leaves their body, correct? Every human, every animal, every living being within a corporeal frame eventually leaves their body. But what is the difference between how, let's say, a common individual leaves their body versus a yogi, versus this person who is speaking? He is aware that he's leaving his body. He's conscious of the fact that he's leaving his body. He is at peace with the fact that he is leaving his body. He's not in mourning. He's not in fear. He's not in regret. He's not desperately trying to hold on to the body as his soul is trying to leave. You know, part of his soul is kind of holding on. No, he is at peace with the fact that, yes, he occupied the body for some time. Now it is time to leave, and may my body go to ashes. In other words, may it be dissolved, may it meet its dissolution in such a manner that it goes back to what it actually is. The body ultimately is meant for ashes. The body eventually disintegrates and becomes nothing. Simply goes back to the material from whence it came. So again, this person here is very peaceful with that fact that he's leaving his body. As is to be expected. As is to be expected. Very good. And then, mid-verse, Om. Now, interesting. We know that many verses begin and or end with Om. But in this particular case, the Om comes mid-verse. Now, why is this the case? Several reasons, actually. In fact, let me say several reasons, of which there are too many to really go into. Let me give the one or two of the main reasons. First of all, again, to repeat this person is a yogi. So thus, the idea is that as he is even aware of what he just said, as he is aware of the fact that he is leaving his body, simultaneously he is also focused totally 100% upon God. So as he's aware that he is leaving the body, as he is aware that he is going to God, at the same time, all that is present within him is that divine sound vibration of Om, which is one of the sound vibrations, one of the sound representations of the sonic form of God, and in this particular case, God as omnipresent, as upholding all of reality. So this is why this comes mid-sentence, this Om. The other reason why, and again, there are several, and I'll just deal with two of them for now. The other reason why suddenly there's this Om mid-verse is because it is signaling that we have dealt with the body. Now we are entering the transcendent. So now, understanding that, let's go on to the rest of this verse. Now, O my mind. We will stop there for now. So, interestingly, this yogi is addressing his own mind. He's speaking to his own mind. And it's a very interesting thing. I won't go too deeply into this, but we've seen that there have been several verses, indeed even several bhajans, several devotional songs, in which we've seen that the yogi or the bhakta, the devotee, is literally speaking to his own mind, as if his own mind is a separate person, is a separate entity. And why is this the case? Again, we've seen this several times. Now we see it again in this most ancient of Upanishads, the Isha Upanishad. Well, interestingly, it's been said, including in the Bhagavad Gita, that the mind can be one's best friend or one's worst enemy. The mind is something that first is separate from ourselves. We are not the mind. It is something that is separate from us. So thus, this yogi is saying this to show that contradistinction between me, as consciousness, as aham pratyaya, as that true I, that true self, versus juxtaposed to mind. I am not mind, in other words. So this is why he is addressing mind as a separate entity, because it is a separate entity. Now, it's interesting. Oh, I'm so tempted to give an hour-long lecture about this, the concept of mind versus self in the history of Western philosophy, because it's been a very confused idea, the idea of mind. Very often people, very well-meaning people actually, even some spiritual philosophers throughout the history of the West, had the mistaken idea that we are mind, that we are indeed the mind itself. René Descartes was one of these people who said that I am a thinking thing, I am a thinking entity. So many people have this confusion of thinking that I am my thoughts, I am my mind, etc. Well, yogically, of course, we understand that that is not a proper understanding, that mind itself even is something that is separate from us. And how do we know this? Because mind, like body, like materiality, is ever-changing. And more, because it can be seen as object. It is not the subject. Only the true subject is the true self. So thus, again, he's explaining here, first of all, mind is something separate from me. I am not the mind. But more, now he's addressing the mind almost as if the mind is a good friend. Because for the yogi it is. See, you remember what I said a short time ago about how in the Bhagavad Gita and other places, it explains how the mind can be our good friend or it can be a terrible enemy. It can be either, sometimes both. Well, for the yogi, it's a friend. For the yogi, the mind is indeed a friend. Why? Because the yogi has the mind under control, because the yogi has complete control over the mind. So in this case, it is a friend. So he is addressing the mind as a friend. So he says, now, O mind, O my mind, please remember all my strivings toward God. Please remember all that I have done for God. So very nice. What he is doing is, again, he is addressing the mind, and very specifically, he is addressing the function of memory that is there in the mind. And what he is attempting to do as a yogi, which is indeed the yogic path, is he is attempting to remember every devotional thing that he ever did in his life, every devotional lesson he ever learned. He is attempting to remember every experience of God that he ever had. In other words, every striving toward God that he ever made in his life. He is trying to remember now. Now, why? Why is this the case? Why is he doing this? Well, first of all, because as I said, this is actually the yogic technique for achieving liberation. It is explained again in Bhagavad Gita, but many other Upanishads as well, many other scriptures, that whatever it is that is forefront in one's awareness at the time of death, that is where one will go, that is what one will achieve. Now, why is this the case? Death is something that is extremely traumatic. It's something that's very, very traumatic for an individual. And this being the case, what you remember at the time of death is very telling of what you were when you were alive. So this being the case, if one can remember God, this means that you focused on God all throughout your life. So this is what he is asking his mind and his memory to do, is now that I am about to achieve liberation, I ask all the resources of my mind to appear and to help me to focus upon God by remembering all the experiences that I have had of God throughout my life as a yogi. So powerful, very beautiful. Very good. So with that, let's go on now to the next verse, which is verse 18. Very good. By the path of goodness, lead us to happiness in you, O my Lord, who is as powerful as fire. Free us from the evils of deceit. We offer our obeisances unto you. And this is the last verse of the Isha Upanishad. So very, very beautiful. So by the path of goodness, lead us to happiness in you, O my Lord. So now, who is he addressing? Now he's no longer addressing his mind. Now he is addressing God himself. He is addressing Isha or Ishvara. He is literally addressing God. And what does he say? By the path of what? Of goodness. Now this is what is interesting. For individuals who follow, let's say, what is sometimes now called the left-hand path, for some individuals who attempt to denigrate the idea of the good by saying that, oh, good, bad, it's all the same, we should just treat them all exactly the same. There is not one verse in the totality of the Vedic scriptures that would agree with this idea. Rather, it is quite distinct. Good is good and bad is bad. Evil is evil because by very definition, evil brings about harm. And if something brings about harm, untoward harm to others, then it's something that is a negative. It's something that is the opposite of spiritual. And then conversely, why is good something that we should strive to attain? It's because it does the opposite. It brings benefit. It brings auspiciousness. It brings health. It brings an individual closer to that which is true, closer to that which is reality. Thus, the path of Sanatana Dharma is not the path of, oh, good and bad, they're all the same. No, it is the path of good is good, evil is evil. We avoid evil, we do the good. And here in this Isha Upanishad, as plainly as can be stated, it states this. By the path of goodness, lead us to happiness in you, O my Lord. So it is by indeed following a path that is ethical, a path that is moral, a path in which, again, we bring benefit to others. We don't harm people. We don't abuse people. We don't victimize others. In fact, on the contrary, we ourselves live our life in such a way that we are a blessing, that we are a benediction to all beings. It is in following this path of goodness that we come to know God. And more, for ourselves personally, that leads us to happiness in God, in you, as this person is saying here in this Isha Upanishad. So this is the path to happiness. It's not one of pretending that we are somehow philosophically sophisticated and, oh, this morality is all relative and it doesn't matter what you do, good or bad, whatever our belief system is, it's all subjective and all personal, etc., etc. Believe that and follow that path all you want. You will know misery. Guaranteed. You will know misery. And if you're following that path now, I guarantee you are miserable now, whether you will openly admit it or not, due to pride. But the truth of the matter is, how do we know happiness? By doing the good, by doing that which is in concert with the divine, concert with God. So this is what this verse is saying. And now, interestingly, he gives a qualification for God. He says this, by the path of goodness, lead us to happiness in you, O my Lord. But now he qualifies, what is this, O my Lord? What is this Lord who is as powerful as fire? Who is as powerful as fire? Now, of course, we understand this is just a metaphor. This is just something that's meant to be symbolic. God is infinitely more powerful than any fire that we can possibly conceive. God is infinitely more powerful than 1,000 suns rising simultaneously, as it says in Bhagavad Gita. But the truth of the matter is, this is a very nice symbolism of explaining what is the nature of God. That God is like a fire, like a very powerful fire. And in what way? Several ways. In the same way that fire, a very powerful fire, has the ability to illuminate. It has the ability to bring light to other beings such that they can see. In the same way that a fire has the ability to heal, etc. A fire has the ability to help us to build, to cook food, etc. A fire is something that is auspicious and beneficial. In the same way, God is as powerful and infinitely more so. So a very nice symbolic reference to what is the actual nature of God. Now, let's go on. Free us from the evils of deceit. The evils of deceit. Now, what is meant by deceit? Deceit, of course, is the opposite of truth. It's the opposite of truth-telling. So in every way, what is meant by deceit is that which is the opposite of truth, that which is the opposite of God. And deceit, meaning deceit that is externalized, that is individuals who will try to lie to us, the nature of this world being such that often it is a world of lies, but also the fact, more than anything, that we deceive ourselves. That, again, we are in Maya, we are in illusion. So what this sentence is asking is that God free us from this illusion. What this yogi is saying is, now, Lord, I am about to achieve liberation. Now, Lord, I am ready to relinquish my illusion, my Maya. So this being the case, I am now ready to enter unto you and into your kingdom, you who are the source of the very opposite of deceit, you who are the very source of truth itself. And then finally, with humility, with devotion, with bhakti, how does this end? We offer our obeisances unto you. We offer our obeisances. We offer our most respectful obeisances, our humble obeisances and respects at your feet, at the feet of Bhagavan, at the feet of God. And it is at this point that the yogi achieves liberation. Expressing bhakti, expressing devotion. So again, these two verses are very powerful. They explain in a very small nutshell the mindset of the individual who is about to achieve liberation, who's about to leave this world, to leave his body and enter into the kingdom of God. And again, how interesting is it that, how does he end this? He ends it with humility. He ends it with devotion, saying, God, now that I am free from deceit, free from Maya, free from self-deceit, free from illusion, now that I'm about to know you, what can I say? I don't have a million philosophical questions to ask you. Rather, I simply offer my most humble obeisances to you, and thus achieve liberation from this world. So very powerful, very, very, very powerful. Last two verses of the Isha Upanishad. So I thank you again for being here with me for these many weeks that we've gone through the Isha Upanishad. Thus ends the translation and the purports on the Isha Upanishad. And with that, officially, we end our class. But I would like to see now if there are any questions from anyone. And if there are, now is the time to begin asking those questions. And I'll give everyone just a little bit of time, because I know there's a little bit of a delay. So even though I'm saying to people now, you can ask questions, I know it'll be probably 20 seconds later that I'll actually receive your questions. And please feel free to ask anything either about this Isha Upanishad or any aspect of Sanatana Dharma whatsoever. Very good. Here's a good question, actually. It's the very first question. Dear Acharyaji, where does the idea of bodily resurrection in Judeo-Christian religions come from? The difference between their beliefs and Sanatana Dharma is startling to me, a former Christian. Very good. And that was Jasmine Knight who asked that question. Very good. Well, first of all, yes, it is startling. Actually, it's a very interesting thing. Let's say, Abrahamic religions are quite unique in this very strange idea that they have. And I've studied this extremely in depth, actually, from a Thomistic perspective, from indeed Judeo-Christianity and Islamic perspective, etc., etc., but especially dealing with, let's say, with mainstream Christianity. There is indeed the idea of the bodily resurrection. That is, that what salvation consists of ultimately is certainly in mainstream Christianity, accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. But that's really the first part. What is something that many people don't know is that most mainstream Christians, even unbeknownst to themselves, really follow a church that has the doctrine that for ultimate salvation, it is necessary to have a physical body. And there is indeed something that occurs at the end times called the resurrection, where physical bodies literally resurrect from the dead. They come out of their graves. They are reunited with the soul, and the earth itself becomes the spiritual kingdom for all of eternity, etc. Yes, it is a very strange idea if you understand philosophy and ontology, if you understand what is the actual nature of physicality versus consciousness, and if you understand the very nature of consciousness itself. It is an idea that is anti-philosophical. It is an idea, this idea of resurrection of the physical body and the necessity of physical body for salvation, which again, even Thomas Aquinas spoke about. He believed this himself. Many Christian theologians did. It is an idea that doesn't make sense in any way whatsoever. It's illogical, etc. Especially, again, if you understand the nature of consciousness and the ontological distinction between materiality and consciousness and how they really don't touch. They can affect one another, but they do not touch one another. As far as where it arose, well, indeed, it arose from Judaism, which is the original of the Abrahamic religions. And the reason why this is a doctrine is because, unfortunately, the Abrahamic religions are not philosophically and theologically very sophisticated. And that's the main reason why. As far as where it arose from historically, etc., that's debatable. I'm not sure if anyone really knows. I know that there are Old Testament scholars, for example, who have debated this, or where did this idea of resurrection actually arise from. But the important thing is that, unfortunately, there is not a very sophisticated understanding of the nature of self and salvation in the Abrahamic religions vis-a-vis Sanatana Dharma. This is why you call yourself a former Christian. I welcome you as a former Christian to continue to explore Sanatana Dharma to the best of your ability. I certainly welcome you to explore this religion. Look at all of our videos on this channel. Please look at our books when you have a chance, especially our main book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. And please deepen your understanding of this path of Sanatana Dharma. It is a path that is very satisfying philosophically and spiritually in every way. So I hope that helps. Very good. Here's a question from Vasil. Acharyaji, what is the difference between Brahman and Brahmajyoti? The difference is too subtle in the Bulgarian translation, as both are described more or less as spiritual radiance from Krishna. Indeed, that is the case. They are describing the same thing. Brahman, well, actually, let me go a little bit deeper, because there is a subtle distinction, but at the same time, they are really describing the same thing. When you get to the gist of it, the only difference being this: Brahman is a word that's used in several senses. First of all, it's used in a philosophical sense to designate the absolute in the most philosophical and thus objective of senses, without necessarily personality ascribed to Brahman, because again, it's like in Western philosophy, whether you're dealing with Platonism, Hegelianism, Kantianism, etc., where you use the word the absolute, rather than having a more personalized, or let's say theologically colored idea of God. And the reason why you do this is, again, to be objectively philosophical. So in the same way that you would say the absolute in Western philosophy, well, in Sanatana Dharma, when you're speaking strictly philosophically, you say Brahman, and it has the same meaning as the absolute. At the same time, there is indeed the secondary feature in which Brahman is also describing, let's say, the more impersonal aspect of God, as God being ever present, as God being ever expansive, etc. So this does indeed describe the same phenomena as Brahmajyoti. Brahmajyoti really is saying the same thing. Jyoti means light. Brahma is not Brahma, it's Brahma with a short a, meaning also Brahman. So it is the light of God. So really they're saying the same thing. And the technical differences, again, are there, but they're not very significant. They are both pointing to the same thing. That is the light of God, in which especially all of the Atmans are sourced, all the individual Atmans. So I hope that answers the question. Give me a few moments, please, because we have a lot of questions, so I'm necessarily having to go through them, skip a few, etc. Look for ones that are especially, I think it would be good for the audience to hear the answers to, so just give me a few moments. Very good. Here's an interesting question regarding karma. Namaste, dear Acharya. If one were to dedicate oneself to helping another soul, would he be chaining himself to that person's karmic results? And would that be just a distraction from Vaikuntha or helpful? Very good. Well, this is actually a two-part question. And as far as the first part, if one were to dedicate oneself to helping another soul, would he be chaining himself to that person's karmic results? No. No, absolutely not. An individual's karmic results are just that. They are the karmic results of an individual. So in other words, why does a specific individual have certain karmic results? It's because that person, using their free will, performed an action with ethical content, either good or bad, previously in time, either in that lifetime or more likely several lifetimes ago. And that person's decisions have nothing to do with anyone else. You know, it would be kind of like saying, well, this individual decided to murder someone, so now not only does that person have to suffer the consequences, but that other person who had nothing to do with it also has to suffer the consequences. That wouldn't be logical, that wouldn't be just. So no, just because you yourself, let's say, have a connection to someone, that doesn't mean that you then share in that person's karma. Whatever is their karma is their karma, whatever is your karma is your karma. So that's not something to take into consideration. And as far as the second thing that you say here, would that be just a distraction from Vaikuntha or helpful? It depends on several different factors, actually. First of all, it depends on the nature of the individual who you are helping. So let's say, for example, if that individual is themselves a very spiritual person, if that individual is himself, let's say, a devotee, a Vaishnava, well, in helping that person, you are doing something certainly that is considered to be very spiritual, and that will not only not distract you from Vaikuntha, but will help you spiritually. Also, of course, it depends upon your own motivation. Why are you helping this person? You see, it's one thing to do good toward others, and truthfully, doing any good is good. Doing any good is a positive. But there is doing good in such a way that it's kind of a material good because your motivation is somewhat material. It just kind of gives you a good feeling, and I'm not saying this applies to you, I'm speaking very generally. Let's say a person does good towards someone else because, they think it's going to make them look like a good person in the eyes of others, or it just kind of boosts their ego, etc. Well, that's doing good for a material motivation versus doing good for a spiritual motivation. That is, that you are doing good toward another, A, selflessly, and B, hopefully even with the idea that you can benefit that person, not just materially, but spiritually. And that being the case, you have now certainly transcendentalized your activity toward that person, and you are not only helping them, but you are spiritualizing the entire situation such that it helps you toward liberation, spiritual liberation. So I hope that answered that question very nicely. And again, please give me a few moments. There's so many questions. I'm just going through them all, and it always takes just a little bit of time. Very good. Here's a question from Connor. Chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 9, Krishna says, "Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship me, but they do so in a wrong way." Can you explain this verse? Yeah, first of all, that's kind of a paraphrase of the verse, but the spirit is accurate in what Krishna is saying here. Yes, this is the idea, and I spoke about this quite a few times actually, the idea of polytheism, and for that matter, henotheism, versus panentheistic monotheism. Those are a lot of isms that I threw at people, but it's necessary because we're having a serious adult conversation. So we have to use proper terminology. The path of Sanatana Dharma itself very specifically follows the latter, that is a panentheistic monotheism, the idea of worshiping the one supreme being who is fully transcendent in his ontological essence, while at the same time immanent in all of reality, and thus immanent in all of the gods as well. So this is the idea that Sanatana Dharma teaches, that yes, there are myriad beings, there are many gods and goddesses within the universe, but the truth of the matter is they are all, without exception, subservient to the one supreme being. And these gods all find their parallels all throughout the Indo-European world especially. We find the same gods in many pantheons, repeated again and again in various pantheons throughout Europe, throughout the Middle East, throughout Central Asia, even East Asia, etc., etc. So there are indeed gods and goddesses. They are very real beings. We can pray to them. We can appeal to them. They are beneficent beings. But at the same time, and indeed what Krishna confirms, not just here, but many verses, several verses in the Bhagavad Gita, is that while you can appeal to these gods, ultimately they derive their power from him. So this is what Krishna is saying in this verse, that, oh yes, you can pray to these gods, but understand they get their power from me. So ultimately, really, unbeknownst to you, you think you're worshiping this goddess, you think you're worshiping Kali, Kali Ma. Kali Ma takes her head and places it with humility and with devotional tears in her eyes at the feet of Sriman Narayana. This is what Krishna is saying, that ultimately all the gods and goddesses, they derive their power from God, and without God, they are powerless. So this is what Krishna is saying here. So I hope that helps understanding that verse. Interesting question. Very interesting question. This is Rudra Stormbringer. And the question is, Jaya Shri Guru, how does one learn the transmigration rituals for causing an Atman of high caliber to be born in one's family? And is this something that is worth doing? Very nice. There are indeed such rituals. They are very hard to come by. They exist in the Shruti literature. There are only a few priests who even know how to do these rituals. If you were to go, for example, to the typical Hindu temple, it's quite possible you'll find some priests who know how to do these rituals, but more likely than not, most priests won't really be equipped to know how to do these rituals because it's a very rare thing. But again, it's just a matter of searching, and more than anything, not just searching for the literature, because you can find the literature. Again, it's in the Shruti literature. It's in the Brahmanas, for example, several other, a little bit in the Aranyakas. It's in a few other places. But it's not enough to just find literally the descriptions of what the rituals look like. You need someone to do the rituals for you. So again, it's just a matter of looking. As far as you ask, is this something that is worth doing? It really depends on you. For some individuals who they have a certain mission in mind, they have a certain consequence in mind, it might be worth doing for you. It depends on why you want to do it. So if it is your idea indeed that you want to give birth to offspring who are extremely powerful beings who will do tremendous good in this world, and you're very committed to that, then certainly it's worth it. But at the same time, truthfully, it's also understood that, ritual aside, one extremely effective way of ensuring that your offspring will be truly powerful spiritual beings is to be a truly powerful spiritual being yourself, because like attracts like. So this is the idea, is that if you want to have offspring who indeed are unlike the vast majority of human beings, beings who are born, again, internally extremely powerful, but in a good way, not just powerful meaning the power to dominate, but powerful meaning that they are wise, that they have the ability to penetrate through illusion, etc., then you yourself be as spiritual as possible, and especially when it comes to the point of creating such a being with your spouse. Yes, such beings will be attracted to having you as parents. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. Matt Adams asks, Acharyaji, what is Soma and its role in Vedic religion? I've seen people say that Soma justifies the use of psychedelics in Sanatana Dharma. Individuals who say that are blithering idiots. There is no excuse for taking psychedelics in Sanatana Dharma, and Soma is not a psychedelic. And please forgive me, I used to know this when I was in graduate school. There's some silly fool who wrote a book in the 60s, of course, when else, trying to say that, oh, Soma was just some psychedelic drug that people took. Of course, this person was some silly atheist trying to denigrate religion. And he made this quite popular, this idea that, oh, Soma is just some sort of psychedelic that, of course, we in the sophisticated modern West, knowing that all religion is just superstition anyway, all these ancient primitives just drank this juice, got high, and pretended that they were communing with the gods, and that is the nature of religion anyway. No. Soma is not a psychedelic drug in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. Psychedelics are not used in Sanatana Dharma whatsoever. When it is used in a pseudo-Vedic context, it is the equivalent of Satanism for Christianity. So in other words, will you find throughout the history of the Vedic religion some fringe individuals who will take drugs, who will do nasty things to themselves and others and pretend that they're being spiritual? Of course, in the same way that you'll find religious abuse in all of the different religions of the world. But the use of psychedelics by yogis is non-existent, by real yogis, by serious sattvika yogis whose goal it is to know God. As far as Soma itself, Soma no longer exists on the Earth planet, so therefore it's a moot point. It was something that was used by the gods in order to retain their state of quote-unquote immortality. And immortality, of course, meaning however long they lived. If a god lived for 1 million years, 10 million years, 100 million years, Soma was a divine plant, and the juice of it helped them to retain that immortality. Soma no longer exists on the Earth planet. So for people who go on and on about Soma, again, it's a moot point. It does not apply to us in any way. So no, serious followers of Sanatana Dharma do not engage in psychedelics whatsoever. Meditation is infinitely more natural and powerful than drugs of any sort, even so-called natural drugs. Why would someone want to cheat? Why would someone want to jump to the beginning of the line, cheating everyone else by just taking some sort of drug, taking LSD, taking ayahuasca, and in this way trying to have a cheap thrill and pretending that they're spiritual? No, we don't do that. We don't do that. I've been on this path for 45 years. I've never had to take a psychedelic drug in my entire life. And real yogis don't. And I'm very happy with whatever little realizations and experiences I have had of God. Very good. So let's go on. We have a little bit more time. Here's an easy question to answer. Do we retain our form in heaven? Now, I need to qualify this. If by heaven you mean svarga, that is the heavenly realm within the material world, or if by heaven, and many people make this mistake, if by heaven you mean literally the spiritual realm. In either case, we do not retain our present form whatsoever. The present form is something that, you see, when you say present form, well, we've had many present forms. We have reincarnated again and again and again and again. So which present form would we retain if we were to retain one? The one in which we were a cow, the one in which we were a god, the one in which we were a different ethnicity, a different gender, etc., etc. Which form would we retain? See, this is why the understanding is that whatever form we have from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, all those forms are temporary. They come and they go. They're all different. But when we enter into either actually svarga, that is the heaven within the material realm, the form that we have is something that is much, much greater than what we conceive of now. We look a lot better. Our body functions much better, etc. Our form, let's say, functions much better. But then if you're talking about the spiritual realm, then it is infinitely so. It is infinitely so. The svarupa, the actual form locus that we have, the locus of being that we have, is something that is so infinitely grander than how we look now that it is inconceivable. So no, we don't retain the same form. And again, give me a few moments because I know we only have a few minutes, so I really want to, again, find some questions that the general audience will especially appreciate. Very good. Let me just answer this question from Jay. Please contact the ISDS through dharmacentral.com and let us know what you need, and we ourselves will send you that. One of my students will send that to you. Very good. Very good. Let me just answer this actually. Namaste Acharyaji, why are there differing translations of the Bhagavad Gita? I've noticed my copy, the Bantam Classic Edition, differs from other versions I've read. Yes, there are, and I could be off by 100 or so because I'm going with previous information. There are at least 700 translations of the Bhagavad Gita in English alone. It might be more than that at this point. There might be 800, 900, but there are, let's say, a minimum of 700, 800 translations of Bhagavad Gita in the English language alone. And like with all translations, some are better than others, some are nonsensical, some are very far off the mark, some simply reflect the translator himself and his biases, etc., his illusion. Some of them are very, very good. As far as why, you do indeed see a very, let's say, wide variety of different ways in which people will translate it, is because it's Sanskrit. It's not like translating from Spanish. It's not like translating from Italian. It's not like translating from Russian. Sanskrit is the most complicated language upon the face of the earth. It's the most expressive language. It's the most philosophical language, in which one accent of one vowel being off, it will alter the entire meaning of a shloka. So this being the case, this is why it is difficult indeed to have perfectly accurate translations. And of course, what ends up happening is that you have a lot of people who have just a minimal, let's say, knowledge of Sanskrit, who really don't know Sanskrit that well, who will attempt to translate anyway, and that's often where the problem arises, again, in addition to biases, etc., on the part of the individual translating. At the same time, there are indeed some translations that are quite good. The one that I recommend above all is indeed Bhagavad Gita as it is. That's the name of this translation, Bhagavad Gita as it is, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And very specifically, you want to get the original edition, that is the 1972 Macmillan edition of Bhagavad Gita as it is. The translation is wonderful, actually. I've read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, I don't know how many times, I've lost track, at least a dozen times. And the translation is quite accurate, and the purport, of course, is extremely good. So I would certainly recommend getting that one as what is the most accurate translation available in English. At some point in the future, and someone asked me about this yesterday, we did a private live stream just for our well-wishers. Someone asked me if I will be translating the Bhagavad Gita, and indeed I will. However, it will not be coming out for several years. I'm guesstimating maybe about 2 years or so from now that I will also be translating and providing a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. So this is why I would say, yes, avoid most of them, including the Bantam Classic Edition, and most of the popular editions, unfortunately, are not very good. Rather, get Bhagavad Gita as it is, and that is a very good translation. Very good. Haruka Suzuhara asks, thoughts on Kabbalah? Yes, we have nothing to do with Kabbalah. I have no comments on Kabbalah. Kabbalah has nothing to do with Vedic spirituality whatsoever. So we don't comment on it. We have no connection to it. We don't study Kabbalah. We don't follow Kabbalah. We have zero interest in Kabbalah. Rather, what I would suggest very humbly is that instead of Kabbalah, you instead read Bhagavad Gita, which is an infinitely better source of accurate spiritual information than anything that Kabbalah can ever even hope to strive for. So forget about Kabbalah, rather read the Vedic literatures, read the Upanishads, read the Srimad Bhagavatam, read the Bhagavad Gita, etc., and learn as much as you can about Sanatana Dharma, which is the most ancient, continuously practiced spiritual tradition on earth, and which will give you actual answers to your philosophical inquiry. Very good. With that, we will end here, just due to time. I thank you all very much for being here. I thank you all very much for your wonderful questions. As always, I could only get to a fraction of the questions. If I didn't get to your question, please don't take it personally. Don't think that, oh, it wasn't a good question. I always have to weigh. Sometimes I'll see 5 good questions and I can take 1. So again, I apologize if I could not get to your question. Just a few very quick things. Again, when you have a chance, please visit dharmacentral.com. This is our main website. When you're there, you'll see that we have an email list. Please feel free to join that. And again, especially if you're interested in the new books that will be coming out in the future. We'll be putting out quite a few new books. There'll be many other things that will be happening. If you join the email list, you'll get announcements about those things, and you'll know immediately when new books are available or events, activities, etc. Also, while you're at dharmacentral.com, please feel free to look at the books that are available. We have quite a few books that are there. We have a beautiful CD called Mantra Meditations that is available as well. We also have a store on there, which I never mentioned to people, actually. A few people privately have commented that, for example, they love this cup that I inevitably use for every live stream because it has the Dharma Chakra, Sudarshana Chakra on it. Well, these are available, this exact cup, on dharmacentral.com, as well as t-shirts, etc., etc. So please feel free to take a look at that. Also, while you're there at Dharma Central, please consider becoming a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. This is a movement that is a non-profit religious movement that is designed, that is destined to restore Dharma to this world. And the only way that we can do this is with your support. And one of the best ways you can help us is by becoming a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. If you go to dharmacentral.com, if you look on the menu, you'll see an area that talks about membership. Please feel free to take a look at that. And if you feel so inclined, please become a tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And in that way, you will be helping us to continue to bring this message to millions of people throughout the world. And again, this ends the Isha Upanishad. Next week, I will be giving a special talk next Monday. I'm not going to give away what it is, but let me just say for next Monday, I will not be taking questions whatsoever. Rather, I'm going to be giving a talk for an hour. And to make up for the fact that I won't be taking questions, the next Monday, I will be only taking questions from people. I won't even be giving a talk. So it'll be 1 hour of questions and answers. But again, for next Monday, I'll be giving a special talk. So with that, again, I thank you all very much for being here. Please join us again next Monday. And namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Om Hri Om. And until next we meet, I ask you all to please take very good care of yourselves.